Hi, everyone. We'll be getting started in a few minutes. We're just going to allow people to join the webinar. So if you could just bear with us, we'll be starting in about 2 minutes. It's going to be an exciting Ask Me Anything with Jolette Westbrook. I think you're going to learn a lot, and we're going to have a wonderful exchange of ideas and thoughts. So please bear with us as we allow more people to sign on. We have a great group today. We have over 50 participants, so please give us a few minutes to get everyone on board, and we will be starting Ask Me Anything, our once a month session where we bring in women leaders and have a conversation, an informal conversation where you get to ask the questions. I'm your host, Mary Yusevich, and I'll be starting the webinar in a few minutes. Hello, everybody. If you just joined us, I'm Mary Yusevich, and today's Ask Me Anything is with Jolette Westbrook. We're going to allow people to get onto the web. We're still a bit away from the participants who have signed up, so if we can give them a few more minutes and we'll get started. Okay, I'm going to get started with the program because we have a few slides before we start talking to Jolette Westbrook, Director and Senior Attorney for Energy Markets and Regulations for the Environmental Defense Fund. But I do want to welcome everyone who is watching today and also to thank our annual event sponsors. We started Ask Me Anything during the start of the pandemic. It seems like a million years ago. But we were able to do these webinars because of the generous support of our sponsors, Eversource, First Light Power, Mass Clean Energy Center, Mass CEC, National Grid, Synapse, Robinson and Cole. So I want to thank them because without them, we wouldn't be having this conversation today with Jolette. I also want to turn everyone's attention on how to submit questions because this program is your program. You get to ask the questions and I just basically provide them to Jolette. And how you do that is go into the Q&A section, not the chat, and put your questions there. And then I will ask the questions of Jolette from that spot. We also have some wonderful events coming up. We have a members roundtable, so you do have to be a member, an organizational member of NEWIEE to participate in this. And please go online if you're an organizational member and sign up. That's going to be on June 25th. It is going to still be virtual. We hope one day we get to go back to doing the luncheon. That was a lot of fun. Another exciting event to get us outdoors is First Light sponsorship of the kayak trip, which is happening on June 26th from 10 to 12. There's only 15 spots available, so please sign up. But you get to go out there in Western Mass and kayak, which is going to be a great time and a lot of opportunity to meet other NEWIEE women and talk about careers and get a chance to network and get the chance to go and have some fun. And then finally, our big event that we're coming, one of our signature events, is Women Shaping the Agenda. This year's Women Shaping the Agenda is going to happen on August 5th. Again, unfortunately, it's virtual, but it's a call to action, changing the face of energy and environment. And I strongly encourage you to continue to look on the NEWIEE.org website. There's going to be more information on that. It's going to be a fantastic event. So I would like to now start the program and ask Jolette to join me so that we can get started. So Jolette, how are you? It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well, Mary. And I want to say thank you to you and to NEWIEE for inviting me to this conversation today.
Oh, well, it's our pleasure. I mean, it's fantastic that, you know, you're here having this conversation because the Environmental Defense Fund, who you work now for, and how long have you been with them?
I have been with them not quite a year.
And there's a lot of, instead of just reading your bio, I thought we'd just go down and talk a little bit about your background. So the Environmental Defense Fund, there's so many groups out there that are saying like CLF and this group and this and Environmental League of Massachusetts. So do you guys all have different roles and responsibilities and angles that you're taking in the energy market that so you don't overlap, that you basically all are helping? And if you could kind of take us down that road and explain how you all interact and how you all work towards what you're trying to achieve.
Certainly, and I think that's an interesting question. And I certainly can't speak for the other organizations. But what I can tell you is certainly each organization has its individual mission statement. And I have found that where we have common issues, there are synergies. And we can work together because sometimes the more people and the more groups that are behind a particular issue, sometimes more people listen. But having said that, there are individual issues that we may differ on. And from my perspective, that makes a lot of sense because I think we get to better solutions by having people present different positions. I mean, if we all thought the same way, why have a conversation? So we have differences and we do align in some areas. But again, each agency or entity has its own mission statement, and that may differ from entity to entity.
So I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, what do you see as the Environmental Defense Fund's mission statement in your, for your perspective?
Certainly, from my perspective, and I'll call it EDF. EDF works on various issues and they all come together. For example, climate issues, ocean issues. And I think really they work from the perspective, for example, in the health area, that a healthier planet makes for healthier people. I mean, we have to look at all aspects. How is the climate affecting the health of people? So EDF's mission is to, from my perspective, to look at all of these issues and figure out how to address each one in a way that will make a difference. And you probably know this, Mary, that EDF has offices all over the world. So it's not just a US-based organization. And I think that that's good because there's lessons learned. We can learn lessons maybe from other countries. Other countries may be able to learn lessons from us. So even though we may be on different continents, we're talking and we're just trying to make things better.
So it's interesting. So EDF, a worldwide organization that's a nonprofit. This is a little different than your past, which was working in state government, being a regulator. Can you talk about the time that you were a commissioner for the Mass DPU? And what did you see as, you know, for your 8 years there, what did you see as the major issues? And DK, if you had a little crystal ball, when you look back at those 8 years, did things that you thought happen, or did things that you thought would never happen occurred? I'm just curious, now that you can look back and say, when I was a Massachusetts DPU commissioner, I thought by this year, this is the way that the energy the energy sector would look like. I'm just curious.
That's a very interesting question. I do want to say that I think I gained invaluable experience working for the commission. I certainly had a lot of considerations to take into account, and I think that helped me to just be very open to different opinions. I think I was like that anyway, but there were things at the commission that hard decisions that had to be made, and they were made. And I hope, you know, in an equitable way based on the evidence presented. And to your question of whether or not I thought things would be different now, yes and no. I always want things to move fast. But I really think, especially in the energy position that this country is in right now, that the region is in, that we need to move at a responsible pace. We're making a lot of changes need to be made, and we're working on that. So when I was at the commission, I thought maybe things would move at a quicker pace, but they're not. But they haven't, I should say, but they are moving. And that, I think, is the key point.
Well, you know, I look back at when your time as a commissioner was basically at the height of, you know, the transitional shift. And I just was wondering if you could comment on that, just because of your tremendous background and understanding, particularly since you're an attorney and you have this kind of insight. Do you see that natural gas was going to be basically labeled as a fossil fuel, and that we were looking at an all-electric system? And I'm just curious if, you know, if you saw that, or if that was something that you had, you know, anticipated was going to happen, and just comment on what you think about that future that's being presented now.
Certainly. When I was at the commission, we had certainly started on grid modernization. And there were many facets to that, including EVs, hardening the electric system. And we did look at infrastructure for gas pipelines. We looked at targeted infrastructure replacement programs. And I did see, and I really thought, and I still believe, that the things that we did to basically look at the gas system and say, are there improvements that should be made? I think that's what we're doing now. We're looking at how does the gas system fit into this clean energy environment. And again, it's something that needs a lot of discussion, and it's not going to be solved tomorrow. But again, it's a responsible way of, we need to find a responsible way of transitioning to the clean energy environment.
And do you see EDF playing a role in that? Do you see them being involved in that conversation?
Oh, absolutely. And EDF has written a white paper on aligning gas with the clean energy future. So EDF is looking at these issues. We have attorneys in various states who are participating in public service or DPU cases where they're looking at the gas issues. What should be done? How should it be done? What is the role of natural gas going forward? And if I may, I want to share my personal opinion on this, in the sense that I think it's important that we look at a holistic view of gas planning. I think that we have to look at natural gas in light of everything else. And I think it's responsible to look at how it fits in, but we need the state commissions to be on board with this so that they're looking at the planning holistically.
So we have a question coming in, and this person is familiar with EDF because they said recently you helped develop a gas company climate planning tool. Can you talk about how you hope this tool will help shape utility investment and how utilities can also weigh more qualitative factors surrounding environmental justice and energy equity concerns? And what do you think about the infrastructure? And I think this is really speaks a lot about your background, Jolette. As I first met you was on the facility siting board in Massachusetts. So I think that this is definitely something that I hope it would be great if you could answer, because this would definitely be from somebody who's had years of experience in addressing this issue.
And the gas planning tool, we're very excited about that. MJ Bradley was a partner in this, and it will allow companies to basically be able to diagram out what they want to do, what the effects will be on the system. And I think that it will help plan gas infrastructure, if it's needed, where it's needed, what ramifications it may have. And so I think this is the type of tools, the type of technology that we need to be responsible. And I know, what was the second part of your question?
Well, the question that they brought up is about the environmental justice. And I just want to let the people that are listening in today, as a board member of NEWIEE, we've taken up this whole issue of DEI and environmental justice as one of our top goals that we want to address. And a matter of fact, the Women Shaping the Agenda conference this year is all going to be on this issue. And with your background on facility planning, I mean, how do we get things built? It's difficult enough to get infrastructure built, but how do we ensure that there is an environmental economic justice where we site and build these facilities?
Well, that's a question that we have to keep talking about. Number one, from my perspective, I think that we need to have more community groups engaged. We need to have groups from the affected communities in the discussions. And how they're brought to the table has always been a question. I mean, do we have intervenor funding, for example? Do we have maybe workshops that are outside of any sort of formal process so that people can come and talk? And also there has to be awareness, which is one thing that I think a lot about. How do people know what's going on? Are we, or the petitioners, the folks who want to construct facilities, the DPUs of the world, are they doing enough to inform people about what's going on? Because Mary, you know as well as I know that when you put infrastructure in, and it doesn't, I'm not just talking about gas pipelines, any sort of infrastructure, there can be long-lasting effects of that. And I'm not saying that they're always bad, but people need to know. It's their community. And one thing that I've sort of learned over the years is try to look at things from the other person's perspective. If someone were building something in my community or if there was going to be some sort of infrastructure that was in my community, what would I do? I would want to know. I would want to be able to weigh in. And I'm sorry to sort of go on like this, but I feel very passionate about it. It's not just weighing in, it's having a meaningful voice when you weigh in. I mean, if, anyone can sit down with anyone else and listen to them for a half hour or whatever, but are they listening or hearing? I mean, what are they going to do with that information? So I'm very passionate about DEI issues. I'm very passionate about community members being given the opportunity to have their voice heard at the table. And one thing that we talk about at EDF is how do we support those community groups? I think it's totally wrong, the wrong way to go for anyone to step in and speak for anyone else. At least, you have to have them speak for themselves. And if they ask you to communicate certain points, you do it. But we need to have the right people at the table, and we need to listen.
Well, and I think the next question is someone asking that similar question, that there's these community electricity aggregation programs are becoming more and more popular in Massachusetts, with the city of Boston being the most notable last program to start. The Department of Public Utilities is taking a longer and longer to review and approve these programs. Why the long delays? And, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on these aggregate programs. Do you think that the public is educated enough to understand what it is, or are the cities sophisticated enough to understand these programs?
Well, of course, there are some really smart people out there. And I think that the aggregate programs do have some value. I think that they, like anything else, they have to be monitored because things are changing. And I know that, community leaders want to look out for their communities. So if I were a community leader, let me put it like that, I would, as I said, just make sure that I was aware if anything is changing. If the aggregation works for this period of time, that's great, but let's look at the next period of time, because we all want to, make sure that rates stay as stable as possible. And so aggregation has its place, but needs, like anything else, just needs to be monitored.
Right. And so, as everyone knows, when I've done these Ask Me Anythings, I like to do some professional questions, and then I like to get more on the personal level. And when you started your career back in Russell Sage College, did you ever think that one day you'd be here representing EDF, being a former commissioner of Mass DPU? I mean, is this something that was well planned, well, tracked, or how did your career evolve?
Well, it's interesting because when I think back, I had a very different goal. I wanted to be an oceanographer. And I thought maybe that's what I wanted to do, but then that changed. And I decided that I wanted to save the world by being a constitutional lawyer. And that's why I went to law school. And during my co-ops in law school, I was fortunate enough to work at some wonderful organizations that really showed me that people are people, and some people need help. And I really think that started me on the pathway of public service, of working with legal services. If I have a skill set that can help someone else, I should be using it to help someone else. So that's how I see my role, both at the commission and now. I was able to have a voice. Granted, when I was at the commission, I understand, I had to make decisions based on record evidence, but I had an opportunity during evidentiary hearings to ask questions, to make sure that issues were looked at. And at EDF, it's a wonderful opportunity because now I can meet with people from the community. I can work on projects, community projects, if that comes my way, if those opportunities come my way. But I can speak out and say, that's not right, or that is right, or let's think about approaching the problem this way. And so this is how my career evolved. I had no idea where it was going to go, but I'm very pleased to be where I am right now.
Well, it's interesting because the next question delves into this whole concept that you said of educating the public, having them be aware. Energy is one of those mysteries. People just have, flick on the switch and boom, they don't ask, where did it come from? What was the source? And the next question is actually talking about that transparency in the electric generation, saying that EV plugged into the grid, people don't know that the portfolio of energy sources could come from anything. Not necessarily in New England is it going to come from coal, even though we do have a coal facility left, but it could come from nuclear, it could come from wind, it could come from solar. So it's the perception that this person's asking the question is, people think that EV charging is clean, but it might not necessarily be clean. So how do we address that? How do we deal with that? Is what basically the question this person is asking.
Well, I think it's a good question. And there are ramifications for anything that we do. I mean, let's be clear about that. Whether it's charging, whether it's solar panels on our roofs, there are ramifications. I think what we need to do is when the opportunity presents itself, as you indicated, Mary, be transparent. The more information people have, the more informed decision that they will make. So I think that we have to keep getting the information, and we have to weigh that information and decide what is the best route to take, because there are trade-offs with everything in life. There are trade-offs. And I think we have to be honest about that.
And does EDF see a role playing in that in terms of educating people? I mean, is that one of your missions too, is to provide that educational resource? And if so, how does it plan to do that?
Well, I think that at least currently, one pathway of educating, of providing education is via, for example, in the proceedings that we participate in, filing comments. I think that we're certainly open to the opportunity of working with community groups. I know that in, I do believe, Illinois, our team there, they're working with the community. And when you work with people, you talk with people. I mean, you develop a rapport with people. And so that's how we're doing it. We don't, we see it as part of what we need to do. We want to engage with the community.
And so the next question kind of touched on that as well, and it delves a little deeper. So a lot of environmental groups seem to be very like one, very extreme. And I just was wondering if you could comment on that, that a lot of them are perceived kind of almost out of touch and unrealistic, of saying, we want just this, no fossil fuel, no this, no this. And yet energy plays such a critical role, as we saw happen in Texas, as we see anytime, even in our own homes, when we lose energy, how dramatic it is to lose, power. So can you talk a little bit about how EDF is different in terms of how they approach this topic? Because you're the one who mentioned it. Every energy has its kind of ramifications with it.
Certainly. And I think the best way to respond to that, or the way that I think it's most accurate, is to say that EDF is responsible. I mean, we have scientists looking at these issues. We try to get the facts. I mean, we don't jump on a bandwagon because it's popular. It's what makes the most sense. What's responsible? Will this get us to cleaner energy? Will this help alleviate some of the climate issues that we're facing? What will this help with the ecosystem? Will this help with the oceans? So EDF approaches it by looking at facts. We look at science, and then we look at real world. What's going on? What will make a difference? What's the next step? So that's the approach that I see EDF taking on various issues.
And then this person brings up a very good point that, in this past year, and you touched on a little bit, I guess I want you to really dive down on it, it's definitely changed the way we think about the link between environment and health. And is EDF thinking about the health impacts and the associated medical expense that has come with climate change? And if so, how can we get, that message out, that people see that with climate change, there's a cost, and the cost is our health.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the linkage is very clear, and it's inescapable that we have to look at these issues. And there's a social cost, there's a health cost, there's a monetary cost, as you mentioned, Mary. What about the medical bills? If, for example, if there's cleaner air and I can prevent maybe some respiratory issues, well, not only is my health better, but my pocketbook may be better too, because I'm, don't have the medical expenses. And this is where, again, the conversation has to be real, it has to be transparent, and we have to figure out ways to quantify this and make it known, not only in the communities, but to people who are making the decisions. We have to figure out how to get this information before folks making a decision, and in a way that they will take it into account. So that's part of our job. As I should say, part of my job at EDF is to figure out these important issues and how to work to get them resolved.
Well, and the next question comes up with, you talk about we have to be responsive, but we have to do it at a pace where we, address all aspects, examine them, then make sure they implement it. And this person who asked this question is saying, but aren't we at a critical path now, that the time is running out, that climate change is happening faster than we have, talked about it for the last 20 years. Is there comes to a point where it just becomes like there's no turning back? I mean, are we ever at a point there? And if so, shouldn't we be sounding that alarm?
Well, I think that what we also have to recognize is that, at least from, and again, we can always speak of from what EDF is doing, it's not like we're only talking. We have, we're working to get, we're talking about gas pipelines. We're working to get leaks repaired. We're working to cut methane emissions. I mean, methane is, we know the science on that. So we're working to get it done. So while we're talking, we're also acting. We're taking actions, I should say, so that hopefully we won't come to that critical point where it's catastrophic. So taking action while talking and being responsible. It's a very delicate balance. I get that, but we can't stand still. Otherwise, nothing will get done. So actions, at least EDF, I believe, we're taking action. We're trying to make a difference while we continue to explore ways to make more of a difference.
But how do you think EDF collaborates with indigenous people in the tribal nations, particularly in Massachusetts and New England? They're a group that's been kind of have had to take on a lot of, this is an issue up in Canada, and then there's the issue in New England. Do you see them as a particular group that needs more protection, needs more education, needs more opportunity for EDF to provide them for understanding and protection?
Well, I think that to answer your question with one word, well, I don't think I can, but
that's okay, take a few.
right, thank you. But I just think it's so important that EDF engage with groups, and it's important that we figure that out, how to engage with them. I mean, it's not like EDS, or at least again, I'm speaking for myself, that I have a list of community groups to engage with. I think it's providing a presence and letting people know, like through this conversation, that EDF wants to work with communities on these issues. If they're, we want to talk. I'm not saying that EDF, can provide the solution for everything or can take on every issue, every case, but starting a dialogue to help support communities, I think that's where we start. And it's various communities because different communities have different needs. And that I think is a really, really important point, that there's no one size fits all for each community. And that's why we need to support the communities and listen to what they're saying, because every community likely has a different question, issue, etc.
So if I understand you, what you're saying is, if there's a community out there that has an issue or a project or being faced with a potential infrastructure or something in that nature, EDF wants to hear from you. And how does EDF then decide which projects merit your involvement versus not? I'm just curious, is there, I'm sure there's not a formula, but is there something that you use to measure your level of involvement?
Well, and that's that's a good question. And I think that There are certain areas where EDF has more expertise than others. And I think that would certainly play a role in it. I think another very critical factor is resources. I mean, I am basically the energy person who's handling markets and the like in the Northeast. So there are limits to what we can do. But I'd like to see, I'd like to sort of take your question in a little different direction.
Sure.
Because even if EDF is not available for whatever reason to intervene or participate in a particular proceeding, to me, it's still worth the conversation to say, well, this resource might be helpful to you, or that resource might be helpful to you. It's all about communication. EDF, and as I said, we don't have expertise in everything, but we can certainly maybe help someone by referring them someplace or to some resource that may be beneficial to them. So it's talking, it's gaining trust, it's being transparent, as you say. Those are all factors that we need to take into account, and we need to do these things.
So turning now to the personal side, and I hope you don't mind me asking this, because I know you do the annual conference, American Association of Black Engineers and or Energy, and we're, as I said to you earlier on, NEWIEE has taken on DEI as one of our pillars that we're working on this year. Can you reflect maybe on why women, particularly women of color, don't choose energy as a choice in their professional field? Is there, can you provide any insight as to why the numbers are so low of, first, you know, we kind of at NEWIEE understand that's why we're creating NEWIEE is to have women get more involved in energy, but particularly women of color, where those numbers are extremely low.
And that question comes up a lot. And I think that a big part of the reason is, again, education. I have spoken at various schools about energy issues. And what was amazing to me is young women would come up after the program, and I often heard, well, we didn't know. This sounds exciting. How do we get involved? Energy has been a field that I think where people just really don't know how to get, it is a field where people don't know how to get started. And so again, conversations like this, I think help. And talking to people, talking to young people at different age levels. I mean, ask a 15-year-old, if you turn on a light switch, where does the energy come from? Or engage in a conversation with a college student about what they think about solar panels and what they think about the climate issues. It's talking. Sometimes I think that people don't think that they can get involved in this area because they don't have the skill set. Well, let's talk about how do you gain that skill set in order to be an active participant in this area. So I think that's incumbent upon all of us, and probably everyone who's listening today, to reach out and let's talk about this and get people involved. I would like to see absolutely more women, more people of color, more just a diverse field of energy experts. Um, and I think it's, as I said, it's incumbent upon us to keep talking about it and to explain the benefits of being in this field.
Is there certain skills that you think, because what I was just going to do on is that you went to law school. Other people say I have to be an engineer. Do you think that, and particularly there's a question that's out here now is like, how did you go from being a commissioner to EDF? So, I mean, like, it's the journey, I guess everybody's trying to figure out, like, maybe I can't because I don't have an engineering degree. I don't have a law degree. Do you see that those skills are required to get into this field, or is it very diverse itself?
It is diverse. I think that there's a couple of characteristics and skill sets, I should say, that are vitally important. One is that someone is inquisitive and willing to work. I think those are two factors because at least I have found that some energy entities, they like to train the people that they hire. So they want someone coming in maybe without a ton of experience, but they want someone who is willing to roll up their sleeves, ask questions, and then the energy entity will help them navigate the skill sets that that entity needs. So I think that it can be approached in many different ways. Not everyone has to have an engineering degree. Not everyone has to have a law degree. I think the interest has to be there. And well, I'm very passionate about this area. And I think that if a person can work in a field where they are passionate, I just think it's a win-win situation.
And I should point out too that I want to do a little plug for NEWIEE. We do offer a mentoring program because I think having some people like yourself, and I would love to encourage you, Jolette, to get involved in our mentoring program, because the mentor and mentees, we provide that vehicle for someone to really have an opportunity to ask you, like, for me, how can I, with what I have now, get involved? And how can I grow? And so I do encourage people to go on NEWIEE.org, NEWIEE.org, and look into our mentoring program. And hopefully, Jolette, not to put you on the spot, but I'd love to next round get you involved, because I do ask most of my Ask Me Anything guests to see if they would help us achieve our goal of trying to get people to get involved and to help the younger people get involved also into the energy sector. We have, I just want to see, this is a really good question. And it's one I think I'm going to adopt this one as my my one questions I always have, like at the end, that I know I'm going to be asked soon. But this person said, how would you like to be remembered in your career in energy? That's a really good question. Like, and you know what? I would like to answer it like, it hasn't happened yet because I'm still got years to go. But what would you say right now would you like to say is one of your major achievements?
Well, it's interesting because major achievement and how I would want to be remembered, those are they're two different things to me.
That is true.
So how I would want to be remembered is someone who is thoughtful about the issues and caring. I mean, I have to bring myself into my workspace. And So that's how I would want to be remembered, as someone who tried to do the right thing. And that's what I try to do, the right thing.
And I have to say, knowing you for as many years as I have, Jolette, I would say that that was one of the greatest attributes that you provided, was that you were always willing to listen, um, allow people to express their opinions, and be an open mind. And that's not always the case. I have to be honest with a lot of regulators. And they seem to have an agenda, and they're very closed-minded to any other, um, you know, opinions. So I want to thank you for that, because I think that, person myself, I think that those are important skill sets to have, especially when you're in a position of creating regulation, um, because that is creating opportunities or not allowing opportunities to happen. So I always commend that, from a personal perspective of what you brought on when you were a commissioner. So we're coming towards, the wrapping up at the end of the questions, and I do like that one. I'm gonna have to say that how would you like to be remembered? Well, my favorite question is the people who have tuned in to our second Wednesday of the month, where we have Ask Me Anything, is that I always ask every one of my guests this question, and hopefully one day we're going to compile all the responses to this question and actually put it in online so that people can see, because I think it's a really insightful question that when we started AMAs, that I wanted to ask each guest. And that is to reflect on your past and think about a time when someone gave you a piece of advice, any point in your career, who that individual was, if you could reveal that to us. What was the advice? And did you follow it or didn't you follow it? And what were the outcomes? So I just love to give you that, we like you to expand on that. So that's why I do it, where I give you plenty of time to talk about it. But I think that gives a lot of insight to people who are tuning in to try to understand for themselves how they want to fit into this world of the energy environmental community.
And great question. I think that the best piece of, I would say it's the best. It's right up there at the top. And that is work to be yourself. And a lifelong friend said that to me many years ago, even before I got into the energy field. And it was a major source of encouragement for me to work to be myself, because back in the day, not that it's extremely easy now, but back in the day, I certainly faced discrimination issues in terms of where I worked, and I will say it wasn't in Massachusetts, but in other places. And it's very hard to work, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and then, face issues that no one should have to face. So what I learned from work to be yourself is I am who I am, and I am going to bring who I am to all of my endeavors, be it in the workspace, be it in my personal life, or wherever. And I count, and the next person counts. And it was just, as I said, such a source of encouragement to know that I have something to offer, just like someone else has something to offer. And that has resonated with me throughout my career.
And I'm sure that you've encountered where taking that stand has been at times difficult.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have, um, let's just put it like this. I have fortunately been able to voice opinions that weren't so popular, but knew that I wouldn't be able to look myself in the mirror if I didn't voice those opinions. I can't make someone accept or like what I say. What I ask them to do is listen and evaluate it. And if they have questions, ask me. But we don't need to be rude about it. We, we just need to take a step back and listen to each other.
And I know that you have a daughter too, and do you see your daughter's future brighter? Do you see the opportunities for the young professionals growing? And I know in particularly, I would like to see, I don't know if she's interested in the energy environment world, but do you see
Well,
that the future is good? Because we have a lot of young professionals on these calls, and I just want to just give a shout out to them.
absolutely, absolutely. And I'm very optimistic about the future because we have a lot of young professionals coming up who they take action. I mean, I think that people or young professionals today, they're ready to go. And that's the type of, excuse the pun, energy that we need to keep things moving. I like the fact that, at least in the meetings I'm in, a lot of the young professionals, they speak out. And I'm all for that. Like, don't hold back. Let us know what you think, and let's evaluate that. But we want to hear from you. So I'm optimistic about the future.
And that is a great note to end on. And Jolette, I just want to thank you for coming on Ask Me Anything. I'm Mary Yusevich. I'm on the NEWIEE board, started 13 years ago, and have been totally appreciative of people like Jolette Westbrook that come on, share their stories. I think we learn so much from understanding where people have from their past to what they're doing today and what the issues are. I do want to remind everybody that we usually have the second Wednesday of the month is Ask Me Anything, but they're giving me a break, Jolette. They're letting me take the summer off. And our next AMA is going to be on September 8th. So please watch the website. We'll be announcing that guest with us. But I just, again, want to thank you so much, Jolette, for coming on Ask Me Anything. I encourage you to get other women in leadership to participate. And like I said, folks, definitely go on and learn about women shaping the agenda. I encourage you to Jolette to also tune in on that show from 4 to 6, because we are going to be diving into that issue that's very near and dear to you regarding DEI and getting answers on how we can move forward. So again, Jolette, thank you for the hour. Thank you for those people who tuned in and came on the webinar. And please remember that September 8th, we're going to have another guest. And you get to ask the questions. And we did get to all your questions today. I worked really hard to do that. So again, thank you, everyone. And I'm going to say good night, because it is 5 o'clock and it is time we can end the day. So have a good evening. Thank you again, Jolette. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mary.